The stagecoach rattled into Salida, Colorado on a blistering afternoon in August of 1882, and Warren Oakley watched from the porch of the general store as a woman stepped down with both hands wrapped in dingy bandages that had once been white but were now stained brown with old blood and yellow with something he did not want to name. He had been expecting her for 3 weeks, ever since he had received the telegram from the matrimonial agency in Boston saying that Miss Hannah Zimmerman would be arriving on the afternoon stage. Warren had not expected much. He was a practical man, a cattleman who had spent the last 8 years building his ranch from nothing into something respectable, and he knew that women who agreed to travel west to marry strangers were usually running from something or toward something better than what they had. He did not judge them for it. Hell, he was 30 years old and too busy working his land to court a woman properly, so he had resorted to placing an advertisement himself, but he had not expected the bandages. Warren stood slowly, his tall frame unfolding as he stepped off the porch and crossed the dusty Main Street. The woman was younger than he had imagined, perhaps 23 or 24, with dark auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun that had come loose during her travels. Her dress was a faded blue calico that had seen better days, and she clutched a small carpetbag with her bandaged hands in a way that made him wince because he could tell it hurt her. "Miss Zimmerman?" he asked, removing his hat. She turned to face him, and Warren found himself looking into eyes the color of honey in sunlight. They were wary eyes, guarded, but there was something else there too, determination maybe, or desperation. "Mr. Oakley." Her voice was softer than he expected, cultured in a way that spoke of education and better circumstances. "Yes, madam, welcome to Salida." He gestured toward her hands, keeping his voice gentle. "You are hurt." She looked down at her hands as if she had forgotten about them, then back up at him with her chin raised slightly. "It is nothing. They are healing. They do not look like nothing." Warren reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement so as not to startle her, and carefully took the carpetbag from her grip. She let him, though he saw the way her jaw tightened. "There is a doctor in town. We should have him look at those before we head out to the ranch." "That is not necessary." "I did not come all this way to be a burden, Mr. Oakley. I can work. I can keep house and cook and do whatever you need." Warren shook his head. "We will talk about all that later. Right now we are seeing the doctor." He saw something flicker in her eyes then, something that might have been relief, though she tried to hide it. She nodded once, and he led her down the street toward Doc Henderson's place, carrying her bag in one hand and resisting the urge to offer his arm because he sensed she would not take it. Not yet. The doctor's office was above the pharmacy, and Warren knocked once before pushing open the door. Doc Henderson was a gray-haired man in his 50s who had served as a surgeon during the war and had seen just about everything there was to see. "Warren," he greeted, then his eyes fell on Hannah and her bandaged hands. "What have we got here?" "This is Miss Zimmerman. She just arrived from Boston. Her hands need tending." Doc Henderson nodded and gestured to the chair by his examination table. "Have a seat, young lady. Let me take a look." Hannah hesitated, and Warren saw the fear flash across her face before she smoothed it away. She sat down slowly, and the doctor pulled up a stool beside her. "May I?" he asked, reaching for her right hand. She nodded, not meeting his eyes. Warren watched as Doc Henderson carefully began to unwrap the bandages. The fabric stuck in places, and he saw Hannah bite her lip hard enough to draw blood, but she did not make a sound. When the last of the wrapping came away, Warren felt his jaw tighten. Her hands were a mess of burns, some healed into shiny pink scars, others still raw and weeping. They covered her palms and fingers, and Warren could see that she had been gripping something hot when it happened, because the worst of the burns followed the lines where her fingers would have wrapped around a handle or a bar. "How did this happen?" Doc Henderson asked quietly. Hannah was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "A stove. I was cooking and I stumbled. I caught myself on the stove door. It was a lie." Warren knew it was a lie, and he could tell from the look on Doc Henderson's face that he knew it too. But neither of them called her on it. "When did this happen?" the doctor asked instead. "3 weeks ago, maybe 4. "And who treated them?" "I did, myself." Doc Henderson shook his head and stood, moving to his cabinet of supplies. "You did a fair job considering, but these need proper cleaning and fresh dressings. Some of them are infected. This is going to hurt, Miss Zimmerman. I will not lie to you about that." "I understand." Warren found himself moving closer without thinking about it, standing where Hannah could see him. When Doc Henderson began cleaning the wounds with carbolic solution and she went rigid with pain, Warren spoke. "Tell me about Boston," he said. "I have never been east of Kansas City." Hannah's eyes found his, and he could see her using his voice as something to focus on, something to pull her attention away from what the doctor was doing. "It is crowded," she said, her voice tight, "and loud. There are buildings everywhere, so tall they block out the sky." "That does not sound pleasant." "It is not, or it was not for me." She gasped as the doctor touched a particularly bad spot, and Warren saw tears leak from the corners of her eyes, though she did not sob. "I worked in a textile factory before. What did your family think about you coming west?" Her expression shuddered. "I have no family, not anymore." Warren nodded, not pushing. He kept talking instead, telling her about Salida, about the Arkansas River that ran through the valley and the mountains that rose up on all sides like walls holding back the rest of the world. He told her about his ranch, about the herd he had built up over the years, about the house he had constructed with his own hands. It was not much, he admitted, just 4 rooms and a porch, but it was solid and it kept out the weather. By the time Doc Henderson finished wrapping her hands in clean white bandages, Hannah's face was pale and she was trembling, but she had not cried out once. "You need to keep these clean and dry," the doctor instructed. "Come back in 3 days and I will change the dressings again. No heavy work until these heal properly, you understand. You could lose the use of your hands if infection sets in worse." "Thank you, doctor. What do I owe you? Warren will settle up with me later. You just focus on healing." Outside, the afternoon sun was beginning to slant toward evening. Warren's wagon was still tied up outside the general store, and he led Hannah back toward it, still carrying her carpet bag. "I need to pick up some supplies," he said. "Then we will head out to the ranch. It is about 5 miles south of town. Do you ride?" "No, that is all right." The wagon is comfortable enough. Inside the general store, Warren moved through his usual routine, but his mind was only half on the task. The other half was watching Hannah, who stood near the door with her bandaged hands held carefully in front of her, looking at everything with those wary eyes. "That your mail-order bride?" Mrs. Patterson, the storekeeper's wife, asked in a voice that carried. "Miss Zimmerman, yes," Warren replied evenly. "Heard she has got burned hands. Shame that. How is she going to keep house for you like that?" Warren fixed the woman with a look that made her take a step back. "She is going to heal, Mrs. Patterson, and when she is healed, she will do whatever she feels up to doing. Until then, I will handle everything that needs handling." He finished his purchases quickly after that, loading the supplies into the wagon bed. Hannah had followed him out, and when he offered his hand to help her up onto the wagon seat, she took it, carefully, using her wrist more than her palm. The ride out to the ranch was quiet at first. The road followed the Arkansas River south, with cottonwoods providing occasional shade and the Sawatch Range rising up purple and imposing to the west. Warren let the silence stretch, figuring Hannah would talk when she was ready. Finally, as they turned onto the track that led to his property, she spoke. "Why did you say that? To Mrs. Patterson? Say what? That you would handle everything. You do not know me, Mr. Oakley. For all you know, I am lazy or cruel or a terrible cook. I could be any number of things. But you defended me anyway." Warren considered his answer carefully. "I know what it is like to be judged by people who do not know your circumstances. When I first came here, I had nothing but a mule and $50 to my name. People thought I would fail before the first winter. Some of them hoped I would, but I did not, and now they pretend they always knew I would succeed." He glanced at her. "You came a long way on faith, Miss Zimmerman. The least I can do is give you the same courtesy. You should know," she said quietly, "that I did not burn my hands on a stove." "Not the way I said. I figured as much. My employer at the factory, he took a liking to me. When I refused his advances, he decided to punish me. He held my hands against the steam press." Her voice was flat, emotionless, but Warren could hear the pain underneath. "Then he told me I was fired, and if I went to the police, he would make sure everyone knew I was a whore who was angry about not getting paid for services rendered. I had no money, no prospects, no family to turn to. So when I saw your advertisement in the matrimonial newspaper, it seemed like an answer to a prayer I had not even known I was praying." Warren felt rage build in his chest, hot and fierce, but he kept his voice calm. "What was his name? Your employer?" "Why?" "So if I am ever in Boston, I can pay him a visit." Hannah looked at him then, really looked at him, and Warren saw something shift in her expression. "You believe me?" "Of course I believe you. Why would you make up something like that? Most men would not. Believe me, I mean. They would assume I did something to encourage him, or that I was lying to cover up my own failings. Then most men are fools." Warren pulled the wagon to a stop in front of his house. It was not much to look at, he knew. Just rough-hewn logs chinked with mud and a stone chimney at one end, but he kept it neat and the porch was solid. "This is home. It is not fancy, but it is yours now, same as it is mine." He helped her down from the wagon and carried her bag inside. The front door opened into the main room, which served as kitchen, dining area, and parlor all at once. There was a bedroom off to the left, which had been his, and a smaller room off to the right that he had been using for storage. A third room at the back served as a washroom of sorts, with a large tin tub and a pump that drew water from the well. "I cleaned everything up as best I could," Warren said, feeling suddenly awkward. "I moved my things into the storage room. The bedroom is yours. I changed the sheets and aired it out." Hannah walked slowly through the space, taking it all in. Warren watched her run one bandaged hand along the back of the rocking chair he had made 2 winters ago when the snows had kept him inside for days at a time. "It is wonderful," she said finally, and he could hear that she meant it. "You are tired," Warren observed. "Why do not you rest while I unload the wagon and see to the horses? There is bread and cheese in the larder if you are hungry. I should help. You should rest. Doctor's orders, remember, no heavy work." He softened it with a small smile. "There will be plenty of time for you to pull your weight once you are healed. For now, let me handle things." She looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won out. She nodded and moved toward the bedroom. Warren watched her go, then headed back outside to deal with the wagon. The work was familiar and soothing. He unhitched the horses and led them to the small barn, forking hay into their stalls and checking their water. He unloaded the supplies, putting away the flour and sugar and coffee in their proper places. Then he stood in his own kitchen, looking around at this space that was now meant to be shared, and wondered what the hell he was doing. He had thought this would be simple. He needed a wife, someone to help with the house and maybe provide some companionship in the long evenings. She needed security and a fresh start. It was a transaction, a practical arrangement. But seeing those burned hands, hearing the flatness in her voice when she told him how she got them, Warren knew it was already more complicated than that. He found himself angry on her behalf, furious at a man he had never met for hurting a woman he barely knew. That was not practical. That was not sensible. But there it was. Warren started a fire in the stove and put on a pot of coffee. Then he went out to the porch and sat in the evening air, listening to the sound of the river in the distance and the wind moving through the cottonwoods. When he finally went back inside, it was full dark. He moved quietly, not wanting to wake Hannah if she was sleeping, and stretched out on the narrow cot he had set up in the storage room. Sleep did not come easy. He kept seeing those burned hands, kept imagining what it must have taken for her to tend them herself, to wrap them up and board a train and travel halfway across the country to marry a stranger. That kind of courage deserved better than what she had gotten so far. Warren Oakley was not a man who made promises lightly. But lying there in the dark, he made one to himself. He would handle everything that hurt her now, whatever it took. The next morning, Warren woke before dawn out of habit. He dressed quietly and went out to do his chores, feeding the horses and the few chickens he kept, checking on the cattle that grazed in the near pasture. When he came back to the house, the sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky pink and gold. He found Hannah in the kitchen trying to work the pump with her bandaged hands. She was fumbling with it, clearly in pain, and Warren moved quickly to her side. "Let me," he said gently, and worked the handle until water flowed into the basin. "I can do it," she protested. "I know you can." "But you do not have to, not yet." He met her eyes. "It is not a weakness to accept help when you need it, Miss Zimmerman." "Hannah," she said quietly, "if we are to be married, you should call me Hannah." "Hannah," he repeated, liking the sound of it, "and you should call me Warren." She nodded, then looked down at her hands. "I wanted to make breakfast, to show you I can be useful, but I cannot even work a pump properly." "You are useful just by being here," Warren said. "A man gets lonely living by himself. It is nice to have someone to talk to." He saw her shoulders relax slightly at that. "What would you normally eat for breakfast?" "Coffee, usually. Sometimes I fry up some bacon and eggs if I am feeling ambitious." "I can tell you how to do it," Hannah offered, "if you do not mind taking direction." Warren smiled. "I do not mind at all." So that was how they spent the morning, with Hannah sitting at the table giving instructions while Warren moved around the kitchen following them. He burned the first batch of bacon and undercooked the eggs, but by the second attempt he had gotten the hang of it. They ate together at the small table, and Warren found himself studying her in the morning light. She had a fine-boned face, delicate but not weak. There were shadows under her eyes that spoke of nights without good sleep, and a tightness around her mouth that told him she was in more pain than she was letting on. But there was also a quiet strength to her, a refusal to be broken by what had happened. "Tell me about the ranch," Hannah said, breaking into his thoughts. "You said you built it yourself." "Mostly. I had some help from neighbors when I was raising the house and the barn, but the rest of it I did on my own. I started with 20 head of cattle 8 years ago. Now I have got close to 300. "That is impressive," Warren shrugged. "It is what needed to be done. This valley has good grazing and the river provides plenty of water. I have been lucky." "I do not think luck has much to do with it. You worked hard." "That too." He poured more coffee for both of them. "What about you? You said you have no family. Has it always been that way?" Hannah's expression closed off slightly, but she answered. "My parents died when I was 16, cholera. I had a younger brother, Thomas, but he died the following winter. Pneumonia. After that, it was just me. I worked where I could, lived in a boarding house for women. It was not a bad life exactly, just a narrow one. I am sorry about your family. Thank you. She was quiet for a moment, then added, I think they would have liked it here. The mountains, the open space. It is so different from Boston. Do you miss it? The city? No, she said immediately. Then, softer, I miss who I was before, when my family was alive and I thought the world was mostly good. But the city itself? No. Warren nodded, understanding more than she probably realized. He had left his own past behind when he came west, fleeing ghosts that had nothing to do with the dead and everything to do with the kind of man his father had been. We should go back to see Doc Henderson tomorrow, he said, changing the subject. Get those dressings changed like he said. All right. In the meantime, you should rest. I have work to do, but you do not need to help. Just take the day to settle in. Hannah looked like she wanted to argue again, but she simply nodded. Warren cleaned up the breakfast dishes, then headed outside to start on the work that was always waiting on a ranch. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Warren would wake early and do the morning chores, then come in to make breakfast while Hannah directed him. They would eat together, talking about small things, getting to know each other in increments. Then Warren would go out to work the ranch while Hannah rested or read from the books he kept on a shelf in the main room. In the evenings, they would have dinner, more simple fare that Warren prepared under Hannah's guidance, and then they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set behind the mountains. True to his word, Warren took Hannah into town to see Doc Henderson every 3 days. Each time, the doctor would unwrap the bandages, clean the wounds, and apply fresh dressings. Each time, Warren would stand where Hannah could see him and talk to her about anything and everything, giving her something to focus on besides the pain. They are healing well, Doc Henderson said on the third visit, 2 weeks after Hannah's arrival. The infection is clearing up nicely. Another few weeks and you should have full use of them again. Will there be scarring? Hannah asked. Some, yes, but it will fade with time. Outside the doctor's office, Hannah paused on the boardwalk. I need to ask you something. Warren stopped, waiting. When I am healed, when I can work properly again, do you still want to marry me? Or was that just something you said because you needed help around the house? Warren looked at her carefully. Do you want to marry me? I do not know, she said honestly. I thought I did when I was in Boston and answering your advertisement seemed like my only option. But now that I am here, now that you have been so kind, I think I should be honest. I do not know you well enough to know if I want to be your wife, and you do not know me well enough either. You are right, Warren agreed. So how about this? We give it time. We get to know each other properly without any pressure. When you are healed and you feel ready, if you decide you want to marry me, we will marry. If you decide you do not, then we will figure something else out. I will help you find work in town or passage to somewhere else if that is what you want. No matter what, you are safe here. You have a place to stay for as long as you need it. He saw relief wash over her face. You would do that, even though I came here with the understanding that we would marry. Hannah, I am not going to force you into anything. The whole point of you coming here was to escape a bad situation, not walk into another one. Whatever happens between us, it happens because we both want it to. Otherwise, there is no point. She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her face, and Warren felt something shift in his chest. Thank you, Warren. That means more than you know. They headed back to the ranch, and Warren found himself thinking about that smile for the rest of the day. As the weeks passed and summer began to fade toward fall, Hannah slowly healed. The bandages came off entirely after a month, revealing pink scar tissue that was still tender but functional. She started helping more around the house, taking over the cooking and cleaning that Warren had been managing. She was a good cook, better than he had expected, and she kept the house spotless without making a fuss about it. But more than that, they talked. Warren found himself looking forward to the evenings when the work was done and they could sit together, sharing stories and thoughts. Hannah was smart and funny when she let her guard down, with a dry wit that caught him off guard and made him laugh. She asked questions about the ranch, about the cattle and the horses, and she listened to his answers with genuine interest. In turn, Warren learned about her. He learned that she loved to read, and had taught herself French from a book she found in a dusty corner of the factory where she worked. He learned that she had wanted to be a teacher before her parents died, but that dream had died with them. He learned that she was afraid of loud noises, flinching whenever something crashed or banged unexpectedly, a habit he suspected came from her time in the factory. One evening in late September, Warren came in from checking the cattle to find Hannah standing at the stove, stirring a pot of stew. The setting sun was streaming through the window, catching in her auburn hair and turning it to flame. She was humming something under her breath, and she looked content in a way he had not seen before. "Something smells good," he said, hanging his hat on the peg by the door. Hannah turned and smiled. "I am trying a new recipe. I hope it turns out all right. I am sure it will be fine." Warren moved to the basin to wash his hands. "How are your hands feeling?" She flexed her fingers, looking down at them. "Better every day." "They still ache when the weather changes, but the doctor said that might always happen. Small price to pay for healing." "Yes." She went back to stirring the stew. "Warren, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you place that advertisement? For a wife, I mean." "You seem perfectly capable of taking care of yourself. You do not need someone to keep house for you." Warren dried his hands slowly, considering his answer. "No, I do not need that, but there are other things I need, or one, I suppose." He sat down at the table. "I have been alone for a long time, Hannah, and it is fine, mostly. But sometimes I look around at what I have built here, and I wonder what the point is if there is no one to share it with. I want companionship. I want someone to talk to at the end of the day. And maybe, eventually, I want a family. Kids to leave this place to when I am gone." Hannah was quiet for a long moment. "I think I want those things too. I did not used to think about family much after I lost mine. It hurt too much. But lately, being here with you, I find myself thinking about it again." Warren felt hope flare in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "And what do you think about it?" She turned to face him fully. "I think that you are a good man, Warren Oakley. I think that you have been kinder to me than anyone has been in a very long time. I think that I feel safe here, and that is something I did not expect to feel again." She paused, then added quietly, "I think I could fall in love with you given time." Warren stood and crossed to her, stopping a respectful distance away. "I think I am already halfway there myself." Hannah's breath caught, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then Warren reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and took one of her hands in his. He could feel the ridges of scar tissue under his fingers, and he lifted her hand gently to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I meant what I said that first day," he told her. "I will handle everything that hurts you now, if you let me." "I want to let you," Hannah whispered. "But I am scared. What if I am broken in ways that cannot be fixed? What if I cannot be the wife you need?" "You are not broken. You are healing. There is a difference." Warren squeezed her hand gently. "And you are already everything I need. The rest will come in time." She stepped closer then, closing the distance between them, and rested her forehead against his chest. Warren wrapped his arms around her carefully, holding her like she was something precious. They stood like that for a long moment, while the stew simmered on the stove and the last light faded from the sky outside. When Hannah finally pulled back, there were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. "I would like to marry you, Warren, if the offer is still open." "It is. It always will be." "Then yes, I will marry you." Warren felt his own eyes sting with tears, and he did not try to hide them. Instead, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gently, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But she did not pull away. She leaned into him, kissing him back with a sweetness that made his heart ache. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. "When?" Hannah asked. "Whenever you are ready. Tomorrow, next week, next month. It does not matter to me as long as it happens eventually." "How about next Saturday? That gives us time to make arrangements, but not so much time that I lose my nerve." Warren laughed. "Next Saturday it is." The following week passed in a blur of preparations. Warren rode into town and spoke to the minister, a young man named Reverend Peters, who had only been in Salida for a year. He also stopped by the general store, where Mrs. Patterson was only too happy to spread the news that Warren Oakley was finally getting married. Hannah spent her time sewing a new dress from fabric Warren had purchased for her, a deep green that brought out the gold in her eyes. She had protested the expense, but Warren had insisted. If he was being honest, he would have bought her a dozen dresses if she had let him. He also rode out to visit his nearest neighbors, the Carmody family, who lived about 3 miles east. Tom Carmody was a fair-haired man about Warren's age with a wife and 3 young children. They had helped Warren when he first arrived in the valley, and he wanted them to be there for the wedding. "About time you found yourself a wife," Tom said with a grin. "Margaret was getting worried you were going to turn into a hermit." "Never had time to court properly," Warren replied. "The ranch keeps me too busy." "Well, we will be there on Saturday. Margaret will want to bring food. You know how she is." Warren did know. Margaret Carmody had a mothering streak a mile wide and had been trying to fatten him up for years. "I will not say no to that." Saturday arrived with clear skies and cool temperatures, the kind of perfect fall day that Colorado was known for. Warren dressed in his best clothes, a suit he had purchased years ago and rarely wore, and combed his hair with more care than usual. His hands were shaking slightly as he hitched up the wagon to drive into town, and he had to laugh at himself. He was 30 years old and as nervous as a schoolboy. Hannah was waiting when he came back inside, and Warren stopped in his tracks at the sight of her. The green dress fit her perfectly, showing off her figure without being improper, and she had done something different with her hair, pulling it up in a way that exposed the graceful line of her neck. She looked beautiful, and Warren told her so. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, smoothing down the front of his jacket. "Are you ready?" "More than ready." They rode into town together, Warren driving while Hannah sat beside him with her hands folded in her lap. He noticed that she was not wearing gloves despite the chill in the air, and when he mentioned it, she shook her head. "I am done hiding my scars," she said quietly. "They are part of me now, part of my story. If people want to stare, let them stare." Warren reached over and took her hand, scarred palm and all. "I am proud of you." The ceremony was held in the small church at the edge of town. The Carmody family was there, along with Doc Henderson and a few other townspeople Warren knew in passing. Mrs. Patterson even showed up, though whether that was out of genuine good wishes or simple nosiness, Warren could not say. Reverend Peters kept the ceremony short and sweet, which Warren appreciated. He repeated his vows clearly, promising to love and honor and cherish Hannah for as long as they both lived, and he meant every word. When it came time to exchange rings, he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, one he had purchased from the jeweler in town. Hannah's vows were quieter but no less sincere. When she said, "I do," Warren saw tears shining in her eyes and he squeezed her hand gently. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Peters announced with a smile. Warren pulled Hannah close and kissed her in front of everyone, not caring who saw. When they broke apart, there was applause and laughter, and Margaret Carmody was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. The celebration afterward was held at the Carmody Ranch, with Margaret having prepared enough food to feed an army. There was roasted chicken and fresh bread, apple pie and cookies, and even a cake that Margaret had somehow managed to bake without anyone knowing. Warren ate until he was stuffed and laughed more than he had in months. As the afternoon wore on and the sun started to sink toward the mountains, Warren found Hannah standing a little apart from the others, looking out at the valley spread before them. He moved to her side, slipping an arm around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "Very," she replied, leaning into him. "I keep thinking about where I was a few months ago and where I am now. It does not feel real. It is real, I promise you that." She turned to face him, reaching up to touch his cheek. "I love you, Warren. I know it is fast and maybe I should wait to say it, but I do. I love you." Warren felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I love you too. I think I have since the day you stepped off that stage with your hands all bandaged up and your chin held high. You are the strongest person I have ever met. I do not feel strong. You do not have to feel it for it to be true." They rode back to the ranch as evening fell, the wagon loaded with leftovers from Margaret and well wishes ringing in their ears. When they reached the house, Warren helped Hannah down and then surprised her by scooping her up into his arms. "What are you doing?" she laughed. "Carrying you over the threshold. It is tradition. I can walk, you know, I know, but let me do this anyway." He carried her inside and set her down gently in the main room. The house was dark except for the moonlight streaming through the windows, and for a moment they just stood there looking at each other. "I am nervous," Hannah admitted. "So am I." "You are," Warren nodded. "I want this to be good for you. I want you to feel safe and loved, not pressured or afraid." Hannah's expression softened. "I do feel safe with you. That is why I said yes." She took his hand and led him toward the bedroom. "We will figure it out together." And they did. The next few months passed in a kind of golden haze. Warren had never been so happy, and he could see that Hannah felt the same way. She thrived on the ranch, taking to the work and the isolation with an ease that surprised him. She learned to ride his gentlest mare, a sweet-tempered bay named Clover, and started accompanying him on his rounds to check the cattle. She started a vegetable garden near the house, coaxing late-season greens and root vegetables from the soil. She made friends with Margaret Carmody, and the two women would visit back and forth, trading recipes and conversation. But it was the small things that Warren treasured most. The way Hannah would greet him with a kiss when he came in from working, the sound of her humming while she cooked, the feel of her curled against him at night, her breath warm on his chest, the way she laughed at his terrible jokes and challenged him at checkers, and read aloud to him in the evenings from whatever book she was working through. Winter came to the valley with a vengeance, snow piling up and temperatures dropping well below freezing. Warren spent his days making sure the cattle had food and water, breaking ice on the stock tanks and forking hay out of the barn. It was hard, cold work, but he never complained because he knew that at the end of each day, he would come home to warmth and light and Hannah. One evening in late January, Warren came in half frozen and covered in snow from a sudden storm that had caught him out checking fence lines. Hannah took one look at him and immediately went into action, stoking up the fire and heating water for the tub. She insisted he strip off his wet clothes right there in the main room, not caring about propriety, and practically pushed him into the hot bath. "You are going to catch your death," she scolded, scrubbing his back with a cloth. What were you thinking staying out so long? I had to make sure the fence was repaired, Warren protested. If it comes down, the cattle will wander off. The cattle are not worth you freezing to death. I am fine. You are not fine. You are half frozen and you are lucky you did not get frostbite. Warren caught her hand and pulled her around to face him. I am fine because I knew you were here waiting for me. That kept me going. Hannah's expression softened. Do not scare me like that again. I will try not to. She leaned down and kissed him, and Warren forgot all about being cold. Winter eventually gave way to spring, and with spring came new life. The cattle started calving, which meant long days and sometimes nights spent helping with difficult births. Hannah proved to be a natural at it, staying calm even when things got complicated and following Warren's instructions without hesitation. They lost a few calves, which was always hard, but they saved more than they lost. By the time calving season was over, Warren's herd had increased by nearly 100 head. It was a good year, one of the best he had ever had. In early May, Hannah started feeling ill in the mornings. At first Warren thought it was something she ate, but when it continued for more than a week, he insisted she go see Doc Henderson. She came back from town with a smile so wide it lit up her whole face. I am pregnant, she announced before Warren could even ask. Doc Henderson says I am about 2 months along. The baby should come in late November or early December. Warren felt like someone had knocked the breath out of him. A baby? Yes, a baby. Are you all right? You look pale. I am better than all right. I am perfect. He crossed to her in 2 long strides and picked her up, spinning her around. We are going to have a baby. Hannah laughed and clung to him. Careful. The doctor said I should avoid too much excitement. Too much excitement. Woman, we are having a baby. How am I supposed to be calm about that? But he set her down gently anyway, his hand immediately going to her still flat stomach. A baby, he repeated, wonder in his voice. Over the next several months, Warren watched Hannah's body change as their child grew inside her. He became even more protective than usual, insisting she rest often and not lift anything heavy. Hannah tolerated his hovering with good humor, though she drew the line when he suggested she stop riding Clover entirely. I am pregnant, not made of glass, she told him firmly. Doc Henderson said gentle exercise is good for me and the baby. But what if you fall? I am not going to fall. Clover is the most placid horse I have ever met. She barely moves faster than a walk. Warren grumbled but gave in, knowing that Hannah needed to feel useful and capable. It went against every instinct he had to not wrap her in cotton wool and keep her safe, but he understood that doing so would only make her feel trapped. As summer turned to fall and Hannah's belly swelled with their child, Warren found himself thinking more and more about the future. He started adding on to the house, building a second bedroom for the baby. He worked on it in the evenings after his regular chores were done, and sometimes Hannah would sit in the rocking chair nearby, knitting tiny clothes and watching him work. What if I am not a good mother? She asked one evening, her hand stilling on the soft yellow yarn she was working with. Warren looked up from the window frame he was fitting. Why would you think that? I do not know. I just worry. What if I do something wrong? What if I hurt the baby somehow? You are not going to hurt the baby. Warren set down his tools and moved to kneel in front of her chair. Hannah, you are going to be a wonderful mother. Look at how you care for everything around you, the garden, the animals, me. You have so much love to give. This baby is lucky to have you. You really think so? I know so. She smiled and touched his face. You are going to be a wonderful father, too. You already are, really. The way you take care of things, the way you handle problems without getting angry, our child is going to be lucky to have you. Warren kissed her palm, the one with the scars, and then her lips. This child is going to be lucky to have both of us. In late November, on a cold night with snow falling gently outside, Hannah went into labor. Warren had been preparing for this moment for weeks, but when it actually happened, he found himself fighting panic. He helped Hannah into bed and then ran to saddle his fastest horse, riding hell-bent for town to fetch Doc Henderson. The doctor arrived within an hour, and Margaret Carmody came with him, having somehow heard what was happening. She shooed Warren out of the bedroom and told him to make himself useful by boiling water and staying out of the way. Warren paced the main room for hours, listening to the sounds coming from the bedroom and feeling more helpless than he had ever felt in his life. Every time Hannah cried out, he flinched. He wanted to be in there with her, wanted to hold her hand and help her through it, but Margaret had been firm about keeping him out. Finally, as dawn was breaking, he heard a new sound, the thin, angry wail of a newborn baby. Warren's heart leaped into his throat and he moved toward the bedroom door just as Margaret opened it. "You have a son," she said with a tired smile, "and he has got a good set of lungs on him. Mother and baby are both doing well." Warren pushed past her into the room. Hannah was propped up in bed, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat and her face exhausted, but she was smiling as she looked down at the tiny bundle in her arms. Doc Henderson was packing up his bag and he nodded at Warren. "Congratulations," the doctor said. "You have got a healthy boy." 8 pounds if I had to guess. But Warren barely heard him. He was moving to Hannah's side, looking down at his son for the first time. The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. He was the most beautiful thing Warren had ever seen. "Do you want to hold him?" Hannah asked softly. Warren nodded, not trusting his voice. Hannah placed the baby carefully in his arms, showing him how to support the head. Warren looked down at his son and felt his eyes fill with tears. "Hello there," he whispered. "I am your father. And I promise you, I am going to do everything I can to give you a good life. You are going to be loved and protected and wanted every single day." The baby yawned, showing pink gums, and then settled against Warren's chest. Warren looked up at Hannah and saw tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you for this, for him, for everything." "We made him together," Hannah replied. "He is ours." Warren bent down and kissed her forehead. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names over the past few months but had not settled on anything. Hannah looked at their son thoughtfully. "What about Thomas?" "After my brother," Warren felt his throat tighten. He knew how much Hannah's brother had meant to her, how much she still missed him even after all these years. "Thomas Oakley. I think that is perfect." They named their son Thomas Henry Oakley, and he became the center of their world. Warren had thought he could not love Hannah more than he already did, but watching her with their son, seeing the tenderness and care she showed him, his love deepened in ways he had not known were possible. The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and first smiles, first laughs and first teeth. Warren found himself doing things he never imagined, like singing lullabies at 2 in the morning and changing soiled diapers without complaint. He liked to carry Thomas around the ranch with him, showing him the cattle and the horses and explaining how everything worked, even though the baby was far too young to understand. "You are talking to him again," Hannah observed one afternoon, finding Warren in the barn with Thomas strapped to his chest in a sling Hannah had made. "He likes it," Warren defended. "See how he is looking around." Hannah smiled and kissed them both. "You are a good father. I am trying." "You are succeeding." As Thomas grew into a toddler, walking and then running everywhere, the ranch grew as well. Warren hired on some help, a couple of young men looking for work, which allowed him to spend more time with his family. He taught Thomas to ride, sitting him on the saddle in front of him and walking the horse slowly around the corral. Hannah started teaching their son his letters, using a slate and chalk, and Warren would listen to them recite the alphabet together while he did paperwork at the table. When Thomas was 3, Hannah became pregnant again. This time Warren did not panic when she went into labor. He stayed with her through the whole thing, holding her hand and wiping her face with a cool cloth, whispering encouragement. And when their daughter was born on a warm July evening in 1886, he wept openly at the sight of her. They named her Rose Margaret Oakley, after the wild roses that grew near the river and after Margaret Carmody, who had become one of Hannah's dearest friends. Rose had her mother's auburn hair and her father's blue eyes, and she was as different from Thomas as night from day. Where Thomas was adventurous and bold, Rose was cautious and thoughtful. Warren loved them both with an intensity that sometimes scared him. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered, and Warren was able to build an even bigger house, one with proper bedrooms for the children and a parlor that did not double as a kitchen. He built Hannah the porch she had always wanted, wide and covered, perfect for sitting and watching the mountains in the evening. They had a good life, Warren and Hannah and their children, but there were still hard times. The winter of 1888 was brutal, and they lost nearly a quarter of the herd to the cold. Money got tight, and Warren had to take out a loan from the bank to buy enough feed to get the remaining cattle through to spring. He worried constantly about making the payments, about losing everything he had built, but Hannah stood by him through all of it. She stretched every penny, grew enough vegetables to last through the winter, and never once complained about the lean times. She would hold him at night when the worry kept him awake and remind him that they had gotten through worse. "We survived Boston," she would say. "We survived those first hard months when I could barely use my hands. We will survive this too." And they did. Spring came eventually, as it always does, and the cattle that survived threw healthy calves. Warren worked harder than ever, and by the end of the year they had paid off the loan and were back on solid footing. As the years passed, Warren watched his children grow. Thomas became tall and strong like his father, with a natural way with animals and a head for business. By the time he was 15, he was running half the ranch operations himself. Rose was quieter but no less capable. She loved books like her mother and could calculate figures faster than anyone Warren had ever met. She also had a gift for drawing, and the house was filled with her sketches of the landscape and animals. In 1893, when Thomas was 16 and Rose was 13, Warren's past came calling in a way he had not expected. A man rode up to the ranch one afternoon, dusty from travel, and asked to speak to Warren Oakley. Warren met him on the porch, immediately wary. The man was in his 50s, well dressed in a way that marked him as city folk, with a lined face and tired eyes. "Mr. Oakley." "My name is Frederick Zimmerman. I am Hannah's uncle." Warren felt his jaw tighten. "Hannah does not have any family. She told me that herself. I know what she believes, but she was wrong." Frederick held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Please, may I explain? I have come a long way." Warren did not move. "Explain from right there. If Hannah wants to hear you out, that is her decision. But you are not coming into my house until I know why you are here." Frederick nodded, seeming to expect this. "Fair enough. Hannah's father was my brother. We had a falling out years ago, something stupid and prideful that neither of us would back down from. When he died, I did not even know until months later. I tried to find Hannah, but she had disappeared into the city. I have been looking for her for years, Mr. Oakley. I hired investigators, followed every lead. When I finally tracked her to that factory in Boston, I learned what had happened to her there. If you learned what happened, then you know what that man did to her. I do, and I wish to God I had found her sooner." I could have stopped it, could have helped her. Frederick's voice was heavy with regret. I also learned that she left Boston to become a mail-order bride. It took me this long to trace her here. Warren studied the man, trying to gauge his sincerity. Why now? Why come looking for her after all this time? Because I am dying, Mr. Oakley. Cancer. The doctors give me maybe 6 months, probably less. I have no wife, no children of my own. Hannah is my only living blood relative, and I need to make amends before I go. I need her to know that she was not as alone as she thought she was. Before Warren could respond, he heard the door open behind him. Hannah stepped out onto the porch, and Warren saw the color drain from her face as she looked at Frederick. Uncle Frederick. Hello, Hannah. You have grown into a beautiful woman. You look just like your mother. Hannah's hand found Warren's arm, gripping it tightly. I thought you were dead. After my parents died, I tried to find you, but there was no trace. I was living abroad for a time. By the time I returned and learned what had happened, you had vanished. I have been searching for you ever since. Frederick took a step forward. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please give me a chance to explain. Let me make amends for not being there when you needed me. Hannah was silent for a long moment, and Warren could feel her trembling. Finally, she nodded. You can come inside, but Warren stays with me. Of course. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking. Frederick told them about the fight he had with Hannah's father, something about business and money and wounded pride. He told them about his years abroad, about coming home to learn that his brother and sister-in-law were dead. He told them about the guilt that had haunted him ever since. I should have put aside my pride and reconciled with your father years ago, he said, looking at Hannah with genuine sorrow. If I had, I would have been there for you when you needed me. You would not have had to suffer alone. That is something I will regret until my dying day. Hannah listened to all of it, her hand never leaving Warren's. When Frederick finished, she was quiet for a long time. I forgive you, she said finally. What happened to my parents was not your fault. And you are right, you should have been there, but you were not, and I survived anyway. I built a good life here. I have a husband who loves me and children who are healthy and happy. I do not need your money or your guilt. But if you want to be part of our lives for whatever time you have left, then I am willing to try. Frederick's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. That is more than I deserve. Frederick Zimmerman stayed in Salida for the next 5 months, renting a room above the general store and spending his days getting to know his niece and her family. He was particularly taken with Thomas and Rose, and he would tell them stories about their grandmother, about Hannah's father when he was young, filling in pieces of history that Hannah had thought lost forever. Warren watched it all with a careful eye, never quite letting his guard down, but even he had to admit that Frederick seemed sincere in his desire to make amends. And Hannah seemed lighter somehow, as if a weight she did not even know she was carrying had been lifted. When Frederick died in early March of 1894, he left everything he had to Hannah, a considerable sum of money, some property in Boston, and a letter apologizing again for not being there when she needed him and thanking her for giving him a chance to be family at the end. Hannah cried for 3 days straight, grieving for the uncle she had barely gotten to know and for the years they had lost. Warren held her through all of it, letting her mourn, and when she was finally done crying, she looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. Life is so strange, she said. When I stepped off that stage 12 years ago, I thought I had nothing. No family, no prospects, just these burned hands and a desperate hope that things would get better. And now I have everything. I have you, I have our children, I even got a few months with my uncle. It is more than I ever dreamed possible. Warren pulled her close. You deserve all of it. You deserve every bit of happiness you have found. So do you. I never thanked you properly, you know. for that first day when you said you would handle everything that hurt me. You have kept that promise every single day since. You have been my safe place, my home. And you have been mine." Warren kissed her forehead. "I love you, Hannah. I will love you until the day I die and probably beyond that. I love you too. Always." The money Frederick left them allowed Warren to expand the ranch even further and to hire more help, so he did not have to work quite so hard. They also started a college fund for Thomas and Rose, wanting to make sure their children had opportunities they themselves had never had. Thomas went off to study agriculture at Colorado Agricultural College when he was 18, coming home during summers to help with the ranch. Rose followed 2 years later, studying accounting and business. Warren was proud of both of them, though he missed having them around. In 1898, Thomas married a local girl named Sarah, the daughter of Tom and Margaret Carmody. It seemed fitting somehow, bringing their two families together. They held the wedding at the ranch, under the cottonwoods by the river, and Warren watched his son pledge his life to his bride with a heart full of joy, and a few tears he was not ashamed to shed. Rose married a few years later to a young teacher named Daniel who shared her love of books and learning. They settled in Denver, where Daniel taught at a school for girls, and Rose managed the finances for several local businesses. Warren missed her terribly, but he was glad she had found happiness on her own terms. As Warren and Hannah moved into their 50s and then their 60s, they watched the new century arrive with a mixture of wonder and nostalgia. The world was changing fast, with telephones and automobiles and all manner of modern conveniences. But their ranch remained much as it always had, a place of hard work and simple pleasures. Thomas took over running the ranch when Warren was 65, though Warren still helped out when he could. He liked being useful, liked feeling the sun on his face and the satisfaction of a good day's work. But he also liked the slower pace, liked having time to sit on the porch with Hannah and watch the grandchildren play. They had 5 grandchildren by then, Thomas and Sarah's 3 boys, and Rose and Daniel's 2 girls. Warren loved them all fiercely, teaching them to ride and telling them stories about the old days, when he and Hannah had first started the ranch with nothing but determination and hope. One evening in the summer of 1912, Warren and Hannah were sitting on that porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains as they had done thousands of times before. Warren was 70 years old now, his hair gone white and his joints stiff with arthritis. Hannah was 65, her auburn hair faded to silver, and her face lined with age. But when Warren looked at her, he still saw the young woman who had stepped off that stage with bandaged hands and wary eyes. "What are you thinking about?" Hannah asked, taking his hand. "Everything," Warren replied. "All of it. How lucky I have been. We have been lucky together. Do you ever think about that first day, when I said I would handle everything that hurt you?" Hannah smiled. "All the time. You kept that promise, you know. Every single day for 30 years, you have kept it. It was not a hard promise to keep. Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat there in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to deep purple. In the distance, they could hear Thomas calling to his sons, and the sound of children's laughter floating on the evening breeze. "I cannot imagine my life without you," Hannah said quietly. "You saved me, Warren, in every way a person can be saved. You saved me right back. I was just going through the motions before you came along. You gave me a reason to build something that mattered. We built it together." "Yes," Warren agreed. "We did." They sat there until the stars came out, bright and clear in the Colorado sky, holding hands like young lovers and counting their blessings. Warren knew that their time was growing shorter, that the years ahead of them were fewer than the years behind. But he was not afraid. They had built a good life together, had raised children who were happy and successful, had created something that would last long after they were gone. And most importantly, they had loved each other well. Warren Oakley died peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1915, with Hannah holding his hand and his family gathered around him. Hannah followed him 3 years later, having lived long enough to see her first great-grandchild born. She was buried beside Warren on a hillside overlooking the ranch, beneath the mountains they had both loved so much. On their shared headstone, Thomas had inscribed a simple epitaph. They handled everything that hurt together. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, passed down from Thomas to his sons and their sons after them. And every person who lived there, who worked that land and raised cattle in those valleys, knew the story of how it all began. They knew about the mail-order bride who arrived with bandaged hands and the cowboy who promised to handle everything that hurt her. They knew about the love that grew between them, strong and true and lasting. It was a story worth remembering, a story worth telling. Because at its heart, it was a story about choosing love over fear, about healing and hope, and the courage it takes to trust someone with your broken pieces. It was a story about building something beautiful out of pain, about two people who found each other when they needed it most and held on tight. It was, in the end, a story about home.